Hello, everybody. As we heard, we are the antiquarians to Gunnar Asplund's library building. This antiquarian perhaps is a notion that isn't familiar to those of you who are not from Sweden. So we'll talk about it a little later. Our presentation will deal with the questions of how to maintain a building and adapt it to new uses, rather than with its function as a library. That is the architect's responsibility. Ours is to see to that the antiquarian values of the building are safeguarded when changes are made. But first, a few words about the Swedish legislation concerning our built heritage. There are three categories depending on their ownership. State-owned, regionally, municipally, and privately owned. And three, owned by the Church of Sweden or other faiths. And these categories, they do not differ in status. The legislation using them is similar with a few variations. On a lower level, the municipalities and cities also have local lists of buildings who they are obliged to supervise from an antiquarian point of view.
The main principle when a building has been put on the list is that no significant changes are allowed at all. When a change is deemed necessary for historical, functional, or technical reasons, the owner must apply for it to a Swedish authority. The National Heritage Board for state-owned heritage, the regions for regionally, municipally, privately, and religiously owned heritage. The National Heritage Board and the regions have departments or committees who supervise the listed buildings and grant or reject permissions for changes. Already during the planning phase of changes to a listed building, an expert on architectural history technology is engaged to help the owner with the application. This person has the title antiquarian. Traditionally, this function was upheld by the architect or by an art or architecture historian. A couple of decades ago, Sweden launched this old name to a new profession that combines the knowledge to the old ones.
The elements of the library building that are legally protected are the main entrance, the entire exterior, the interior plans older than 1933, immovable furniture older than 1961, original layers of paint on walls and floors and ceilings, outdoor parts like stairs, walls, ground paving, etc., and the structural frame of the building, and all sculptural decorations indoor and outdoor, and the exterior of the bazaars. This slide that you see is by Gunnar Asplund himself, and it shows the library building surrounded by terraces and plantings, also planned by himself.
The years 1933 and 1961 are mentioned above are particularly emphasized as worthy of legal protection, except the original parts, of course. In 1933, the western wing was completed and added to the main building, as we heard Marcelo talked about. And 61, Gunnar Asplund's son, the architect Hans Asplund, designed, among other features, the elegant double stairs leading from the rotunda floor to the first bookshelf gallery. The mobile furniture, such as chairs, tables, and similar pieces, was to a great extent designed by Asplund himself. Unfortunately, this unique heritage is not protected in Swedish legislation. For the library alone, Asplund designed 19 varieties of chairs, each adapted to different uses and places, along with many tables and freestanding shelves. Many of these items remain in the building, while others have disappeared, sometimes sold at auctions. Within our project, the remaining furniture has been well documented and conserved. Luckily, the current library leadership values and proudly to reuses this important part of Asplund's legacy.
A rare quality of Asplund's library is the fact that it is representative of a transitional period of transitional architecture between the Swedish classicism of the 20s and Swedish modernism called functionalism. Asplund was one of the foremost architects of his time, and he designed a fair amount of renowned classicist projects. But he also was one of the architects that introduced functionalism, colloquially funkis, in Sweden. The public library was inaugurated in 1928, and by that time the planning of the Stockholm exhibition had already started, with Asplund as chief architect. The exhibition was the first broad introduction of modernist architecture in Sweden. Asplund's ambiguity is jokingly illustrated in this 1928 caricature showing, I quote, "Old man Asplund," unquote, wanting to be among the modern ones, but he's anxious that the glass walls will undermine his library building. The drawing shows the impression of the glass bazaars beneath the stone walls better than any photo can do. And by the way, Asplund was some 45 years when he did at that time.
Gunnar Asplund's work on the library began with a stretch of classicist designs, complete with highly decorated entrances and a cupola crowned the central rotunda. The rotunda was introduced early in his design. As the 20s progressed, the exterior decoration became more and more sparse, and the final design, the last picture, is an exposition of basic geometrical forms with a minimum of ornamentation, which gives the building a more monumental character. Asplund masterfully blended elements of both styles to create a unified whole. This design to the left shows the planned western wing with the reading room and the book storage. For economic reasons, the completion of it was postponed 5 years until 1933. The final version to the right features a distinctly more functionalist style in both the facade and the interior.
The most striking example of this merger of styles we can find below the north and east facades. Seen from a distance, it seems like in the caricature that the heavy stone library building rests on an airy foundation made up by the fragile glassed bazaars, continuing shops and restaurants. These so-called the coexistence, complete with the so-called donkey stairs leading past the bazaars up to the library's main entrance. The bazaars were built in 1930, 2 years after the main building, and the same year as the Stockholm exhibition. Mm-hmm.
This slide showing the entrance of the Stockholm exhibition, Sweden's introduction to functionalism, It became the ruling style for a couple of decades, closely connected with the Swedish Social Democratic Party and ruling power through wartimes and post-war boom. The renovation and conservation of the bazaars is already completed. The glass walls in the northern half are original, while the southern was a clumsy and insensitive contemporary model. They have been substituted with new ones, inspired by the original ones. On the photo, you can also see the pergola built on the southern terrace. It was earlier torn down during the 50s, but has now been reconstructed using Asplund's original drawings. The fact that the building was completed in a transitional period can present a complication when deciding about antiquarian questions. One example is the choice of wall colors in a couple of the most important interior spaces, the big reading rooms. Originally, their walls and ceilings were painted with fat colored lime mortar. One of the halls in dark red, or actually two of the halls, the other in a dark green nuance. These colors were adapted to the artistic decorations in this hall, the picture. This kind of pre-painted marble-like mortar was also used in the main entrance hall, where it still remains and will be conservated.
Relatively soon after the completion in 1935, the two main reading rooms had their white walls and ceilings painted white, maybe on Asplund's own initiative. Why? We don't know. Maybe the rooms were simply too dark, with both walls and ceilings finished with a very dark and glossy surface. But the arrival of functionalism may also offer an explanation. Only 5 years after the inauguration of the library in 1928, a western wing, also a reading room, was added. Both in exterior and its interior, they have typical functional traits with almost no decoration and using the so-called American steamer aesthetics, with an indoor balcony equipped with a thin metal railing, just like the big ships crossing the Atlantic. This wing was internally painted white, both on walls and ceiling. And in 1935, 3 years after the western wing, the big reading rooms also got their walls and ceilings painted white. The original layers of pre-pigmented mortar have been deliberately preserved in niches in both main reading rooms. Why? The only logical explanation is an ambition is an ambition with our predecessors to allow generations to come to see what the rooms looked like when they were newly built. Normally, these niches are covered by books in shelves. Conserving these rooms presents a dilemma. Should we return to Asplund's original 1920s dark colors, or should we accept the present, frankly a bit dull, white? In any other ordinary listed room, if there could be such a thing, with walls painted in many times in different colors, a return to the original paint chosen by its architect would be the natural choice. In this case, the answer is more complicated. The change of original colors was made only a few years after its completion. The change was probably done on the initiative of the architect himself. Fragments of the original material, the same kind of fast pre-pigmented or fat pre-pigmented mortar used in the main entrance, can be found in many places, but they are not sufficient to allow for a conservation of the entire layer. The return of the colors would have to be made with different materials. And a complete conservation could mean a costly return to the dark reading rooms, which have to be compensated by artificial illumination. Our choice was to keep the white color on the walls and ceilings, and most certainly keeps the original material in the niches for the benefit of our grandchildren. However, there is no easy way, as you can see from the following pictures of our presentation.
This photo on the right shows the necessity of an antiquarian presence, but at the same time it shows that mistakes sometimes happens, no matter how scrupulously you mark where holes can be done and where they are strictly forbidden. Sometimes communications fail and mistakes are done. In this case, the regional authorities can give a fine, but the hole will be repaired and conserved. And this picture I couldn't not take when passing congenial company name of the demolition company. Our last slide shows some of the photos of the facade color. The colors of Asplund's library building, except for the bazaars, have never been near the functionalist ideals. From the start, they have been painted in reddish beige and later in various terracotta and orange hues. For one period, even the bazaars were orange. The decision how to finish the facades has been a long story, including a hunt for samples of the original mortar behind lifts and ventilation shafts, which was painstakingly removed in the 60s, and searching in the archives for clues on forgotten photos. Together with experts from the region and City Building Commission and the Stockholm City Historical Museum, we decided to return to what, by all probability, are the original colors. 2 nuances of reddish beige, one slightly darker on the rusticated lower part, and one lighter on the upper part. That was all.
Yes.
Thank you for your
Thank you for your attention.
attention.